Friends. So as some of you know, I've been on the mind-body journey for quite a long time. I've known about mind-body journey through Dr. John Sarno and the Curable app for about 5 years now. But I had symptoms my whole life. And at one point, I had chronic fatigue syndrome, ME, so bad that I was bedbound for a couple of years. And I was down to eating two foods. I could only eat baked potatoes and carrot juice. I thought I was dying. But some part of me, like an angel or some act of grace, prompted me to start getting in touch with my deep, deep buried feelings. And at the first time I did this, I had just gone through the passing of my mother at a very young age. And so when I started to get in touch with emotions, and it took a while, but I did it every day, the CFS symptoms, the chronic fatigue started to lift. And this was remarkable to me. But then I started going on a very strong spiritual path and went through a lot of difficulty and challenge. And these kept perpetuating symptoms over and over. IBS, insomnia. I had various pains throughout my body. It always seemed like there was something hurting. And it wasn't until the COVID started, that it was actually before COVID, that I had some other symptoms start that progressively got worse and worse and worse and worse because I tried to treat them through the medical model. Now, once again, I got really lucky to find out about the mind-body approach. And I read Dr. John Sarno. I did the Curable app. I really educated myself. I went through Dr. Howard Schubiner's Unlearn Your Pain program, and I really understood in myself what was going on. However, I did a few things wrong, and this is kind of what I want to talk about. And because, people say, well, why did it take you so long to get better? And honestly, it's because I did some things wrong, okay? And I've been talking about things to do, but I want to talk about the things that I did wrong because they're just as important. And one of the big ones was, and I had a coach. I was working with a coach for 5 months, and this coach told me a couple things that were not helpful for me. It was helpful for me in the beginning to have a coach and to have a community of people that were working with mind body symptoms and were afraid, right? And hurting. And it was helpful to have camaraderie in that. But what I was told kept me kind of stuck in a loop for about 6 months, okay? And the first one was, don't fear your symptoms. And so I didn't let my authentic feelings come out around my symptoms, which was a lot of fear. I was afraid. I was afraid I was never going to walk again, and because I couldn't even walk barely to the bathroom, and I was on a cane and in extreme pain, right? And this suggestion, which this coach repeated every single day, so it was pretty hardwired in there, was don't be afraid of your symptoms. And so I found myself resisting my fear. And this created what we call secondary fear of fear, okay? And the fear of fear was like putting another iron door over the repression. And I wasn't allowed to feel that primary repression, which was running my symptoms to begin with. And in this state, because it was so hardwired in me, it stayed with me for a very long time. Okay? Don't be afraid of your symptoms. And so, of course, now that I'm working with clients, I mean, it's like everybody's afraid of their symptoms. It's normal. It's like it hurts, right? What's going to happen? And it's true, we don't want to focus on the symptoms. That's different than fear. Focus is not an emotion. Fear is an emotion, okay? And fear will be directed in certain things, but it's still a primary feeling, okay? And that's what we want to get into. We want to express the primary feeling. Now, focusing and fixing and ruminating and these kinds of things are byproducts of repression, the repression of fear, okay? And so, yeah, we don't want to go into fixing, focusing, monitoring it. Has it gone down? Is it worse? That is putting our unneeded fixing attention on it, which will give the brain the message that these symptoms are a problem. Okay, so we don't want to go into fixing and focusing. But the fear of the symptoms is different because it's fear, okay? And, in my lightning journaling process, we can start out with that energy of like, I'm so afraid of my symptoms. Oh my God, what's going to happen? Oh my God. But then we get into the primary emotion, which is the fear. And that's what needs to get expressed. And the more we can express that, you will see that your fear of your symptoms is going to become less and less and less. Because ultimately we want to get to a place where we don't fear them. We can get to a place of like almost indifference that they're there, but we know that that's not really what our recovery is going to be about. Okay? About getting rid of symptoms. Our recovery is about getting that emotion out and expressing it. So this was a big one for me that really kept me in a loop. And and as a result, I found myself trying to calm down all the time. You do all these like biohacks, like the vagal therapy stuff and relaxation techniques and whatever. And those might help you like in the moment, but they don't touch the underlying cause of symptoms. Okay? It's not about relaxing. It's about getting into the repression and getting that out, getting it to express itself so it can complete. Okay? So that was the first thing that I did wrong. The second thing I did wrong was I was told, so I had my main trigger when my hip and leg were so severe was walking down the street. Walking was my biggest trigger, okay? But walking on dirt in nature was easier for me than walking down the street. And I live right in the little downtown area, and it's pedestrian right outside my door, and the post office is 2 blocks away. And so I wanted to walk down the street, and I knew I needed to for part of my recovery. But I noticed that I would be afraid of people seeing me, okay? And this was, of course, more repressed fear. It was a younger part that was insecure and afraid and not feeling safe. And I shared this with my coach, and my coach just said, oh, don't care what people think. Which, because I wanted to believe the coach, I tried to not care what people would think. And I would push that repressed part down further, which, as I was doing it, walking down the street, would cause my symptoms to increase. And I thought it was because I was putting pressure on myself. Okay, so here I am trying to figure out why my symptoms are getting worse, trying not to let it bother me that people might see me, and I'm pushing down my authentic feelings again. Okay. This is really what I'm getting at, is when we're pushing down authenticity, we're pushing down our recovery. Okay? And so I think this is really important to share, because as I'm talking to people, I'm like, oh, you did that too. Oh, you did that too. And so knowing that if we're like doing things to manage how we're feeling in certain circumstances, especially around our symptoms, the chances are really good, if we're trying to manage it, like not care what people are thinking, we're probably repressing. Okay? And the third thing, which is a biggie, because this one lasted for years, was I did brain retraining. Okay? And this is a little touchy for me to talk about, but I want to talk about it because it's the same, it did the same exact thing. And the brain retraining I did was a very popular one. I committed to it for 3 years. I read all the books. I did the meditations 3 times a day. And I really, really tried to incorporate the program and the method, I should say. But what happened is that method uses something called a disruption. And in this work, it used the word change. Like whenever we were in a certain looping pattern, it said to change and just try to feel better, incorporate better, like what he called elevated emotions. And the elevated emotions, they were helpful, I have to say. And there's one meditation that I still recommend to people, just to get you to feel joy and happiness and lightness and confidence and these kinds of things. And it was helpful that way. And I did notice that my inner state of being started to feel better. And that was really good. Okay? So that part of the program was really important for me. And there's other people that say, yeah, use visualization, use anything to kind of like give your mood a boost, because it's kind of habituated into like mine was habituated into a downward spiral. So those elevated emotions were good. However, a big part of the program was about disruption. And this is what a lot of brain retraining does, is it disrupts something authentic in us, something that maybe is afraid. Maybe you're afraid of symptoms. I'm just going to use that as an example. And so the invitation in the program would be to change that into something that's more elevated. I got this, I'm good, right? Which is helpful in a way, because we want to feel those feelings of confidence. But if we're pushing down our authentic feelings, we're back in repression again. And it's the repression of our authentic feelings that's causing the symptoms. Plain and simple. There's nothing else. And so I kept trying to do this. And my symptoms for a while were getting better using the brain retraining work. And so I kept at it and I kept at it and I kept trying and I kept trying. But meanwhile, I wasn't getting into the repression effectively. Not in a way that really, really helped complete the parts that were needing completion. And it wasn't until I was back into a stressful environment that my symptoms came back, that I could see that it wasn't working. that my symptoms were coming back with a vengeance. And so I had to start all over, basically. And this is after what? 3.5 years. I had to start all over. And this is when I started to work with allowing, the allowing energy. And allowing is, I use it all the time, allowing myself to be just the way I am. Because everything else prior that I had been doing wrong was resisting. Not caring about what people were thinking was resisting my authentic feelings. Not being afraid of my symptoms was resisting my authentic feelings. Doing the brain retraining disruption was resisting my authentic feelings. And learning allowing myself to be the way I am, was the first time I started using the approach of non-resistance, which is a very practical spiritual approach, right? But because we're so unconscious, it's very difficult to access a real pure non-resistance stance. So in the mind-body world, we're becoming very conscious, becoming very aware of all the ways we resist ourselves. Okay? And this is really important, starting to see all the ways that we resist ourselves so that we can allow ourselves to be just the way we are. And this is the foundation. This is the foundation of everything else I talk about. Allowing the protectors, allowing the emotions, and showing the brain that through allowing, we're safe. Because the resistance to all our issues, to everything that we experienced in our inner world, is the reason we have symptoms. The resistance to life. So I hope this was helpful. You know, I always want to share my personal journey because it was rich. I tried a lot of things. But now I think I am pretty clear about the mechanics of the mind-body world and what works and what doesn't. So I hope this is helpful. All right, be well. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.